The sky above Earth was not blue anymore. It was silver, filled with light from the Empire's warships. Thousands of them floated in the upper atmosphere, silent and still, like sharks before a kill. The people on the ground didn't scream anymore. There was no point. They had seen the Empire before. They knew what was coming. In the center of a ruined city, a man stood among the ashes. His uniform was torn, his hands black with dust, and his face calm in a way that scared even those around him. His name was Commander Elias Grant, the last officer of the United Earth Defense Command. Behind him, a few soldiers worked on a broken satellite dish, trying to connect to the last communication network still alive. "Signal ready, sir," said a young woman beside him. Her voice trembled, but she tried to sound brave. "All channels are open." Elias looked up at the gray sky. He could almost see the reflection of the alien fleet in the clouds. "Good," he said softly. "Let them watch." The camera flickered to life. Across hundreds of planets, across stations and colonies ruled by the Empire, screens began to light up. Alien citizens, soldiers, and slaves saw a human face appear. A face they had been told was weak. A race they thought had been beaten long ago. "This is Commander Elias Grant of Earth," he began. His voice echoed through every transmission line still working. "To the Empire fleet above our planet, you have come to take what isn't yours. You've taken 100 worlds already. You will take no more." High above, on the command ship Varian's Fist, General Core watched the human speak. He had seen countless last stands before, all ending the same way: fire, screams, silence. He leaned back in his throne of black metal and smirked. "He thinks his word can stop an empire," Core said. "How human." But on the screen, Elias didn't look afraid. His eyes were tired, but steady. He raised his head slightly, as if staring directly at the alien general through the stars. Then, in one quiet moment that cut through all the static and noise of the universe, he said one word. "Leave." The word echoed. Simple, cold, final. And then, something happened. On the bridge of Varian's Fist, the lights flickered. Instruments beeped in confusion. One of Core's officers turned from his console. "Sir, we're losing power readings across the formation." "Explain." Core snapped. "I can't. It's like something's draining our energy fields. Our shields are dropping. Sensors are blind." A strange ripple appeared around Earth, a shimmer, almost invisible, like heat-bending light in the air. The fleet's scanners couldn't identify it. Ships began to drift slightly off formation as if gravity itself was pulling them. On the surface, Elias stood motionless, watching the horizon. The wind howled between the broken skyscrapers. He could hear faint cheer from the soldiers near him, but he said nothing. His eyes never left the sky. Above, a small cruiser suddenly went dark. Engines dead, lights gone. Then another. Then 20 more. The whole front line of the invasion fleet blinked out like candles in a storm. Core stood, his voice a growl. "Get me control of those ships. Now." No response. "Communications are down, sir," another officer said, his hands shaking. "All channels, they are jammed." Core slammed his fist into the console. "By whom?" The officer didn't answer. He just stayed at the static on his monitor. The feed from Earth was still running, showing that same human standing in ruins, silent now. Only his eyes moved, slow, deliberate, like a man watching the inevitable. Then, suddenly, every screen in the Empire fleet turned black. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. No data, no sound, just emptiness. And in that void, a single voice whispered through the comms systems of every ship, every station, every control room. It was the human's voice, distorted but unmistakable. "I said, leave." The static grew louder until it became a roar. Core's ship trembled. "Shut it down," he yelled. But the power core of the Varian's Fist started to overload. Bright blue light poured from its vents, flooding the bridge. Then, silence again. The ship drifted, dead in orbit, its proud banners burning away in the radiation glow. Back on Earth, Elias slowly lowered his head. The signal had cut off completely now. Around him, the soldiers stood in shock. Some were smiling, some crying. What happened, Commander? The young woman asked, voice shaking. Elias didn't answer right away. He looked toward the horizon, where black smoke rose in the distance. They'll call it a miracle, he said finally. But it's not. Then what is it? He turned to her, his face pale but calm. It's the beginning. The camera, still half alive, recorded the last image of him standing under the gray sky. The man who had faced an empire and spoken a single word that would be remembered across galaxies. Above Earth, alien wreckage floated in silence. The once invincible fleet now looked like a broken mirror reflecting the last light of the sun. No one knew what had caused the power to fail. Not yet. Some said it was human technology. Others said it was something ancient, something that had slept beneath the planet for ages. But one thing was certain. The Empire had stopped. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy was silent. The Empire had never known fear. For centuries, its fleets had swept across galaxies, crushing every planet that dared to resist. No one fought back and lived to tell the tale. Until life. Now, high above the blue planet, the once mighty fleet floated in silence. Thousands of alien ships hung dead in orbit, their power systems dark, their communications silent. No signal came from the command ship Varian's fist. Across the galaxy, confusion spread. Broadcasts replayed the last known transmission. The moment when the human, Elias Grant, stood before the ruins and said a single word, leave. The Empire's propaganda networks tried to cover it up, calling it technical failure or solar interference. But soldiers whispered in fear. Citizens began to ask questions. For the first time, the Empire looked weak. Deep beneath the ruins of Washington, D.C., Elias watched it all from a flickering screen in an underground command bunker. The room was cold and filled with the soft hum of backup generators. Only a few people remained, the last of Earth's military command. A young technician turned from the console. So, the satellites confirm it. Half the fleet still disabled. No movement. Elias nodded slowly. Good. He rubbed his forehead, exhaustion visible in every line on his face. That gives us time. Time for what? Asked Captain Myra, the same young officer who had stood beside him during the broadcast. Elias didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed fixed on the static-filled screen showing the silent alien ships. Time to make sure they don't come back. He walked over to a dusty control panel in the corner of the bunker and entered a code. The metal door behind him slid open with a groan. Inside was a dark stairway leading deep underground. Myra frowned. Sir, that area's restricted. What's down there? The only thing that might save us, Elias said. Come with me. They descended the stairs. The air grew colder and heavier. When they reached the bottom, massive steel doors blocked their way, sealed with warning signs in faded paint. Project Mirror, do not activate. Myra stayed at it. This was supposed to be decommissioned decades ago. Elias smiled faintly. It was. Officially. He placed his hand on the scanner, and the door opened with a hiss. Inside, rows of machines glowed faintly blue. Transparent panels showed coils of silver plasma pulsing with soft light. It looked more like a cathedral than a weapon room. This, Elias said, is the Mirror Protocol. Myra walked slowly among the machines. A myth, she whispered. I thought it was just a rumor, a defense system that reflects energy attacks. Elias nodded. That's what they wanted people to believe. The truth is, it's more than reflection. It turns enemy energy back on itself. The stronger they attack, the harder they get hit. So that's what happened in orbit? She asked. Partly, Elias said. The system was still experimental. It wasn't meant to shut down an entire fleet. It should have only shielded the planet. But something amplified it, something we don't understand. He paused, staring at the glowing coils. We built this to protect Earth from invasion. Instead, it nearly destroyed everything above us. The Empire's mistake was thinking we were finished. They underestimated what desperation can build. As they spoke, far above them, General Kor's ship flickered back to life. Emergency lights came on, and his crew stumbled from the shadows. Report. Kor barked. Minimal power restored, sir, said one officer. Half the fleet is still dead. We're the only ship running on auxiliary energy. Core clenched his jaw. Send a message to the Emperor. I want every resource available. We're going to burn that planet until nothing is left. But the communication officer hesitated. So, transmission range is limited. That energy surge damaged subspace relays. It could take hours to re-establish long-range contact. Core's eyes narrowed. Then we use the time wisely. Prepare orbital bombardment. I don't care what happens to the ships near the surface. He looked down at Earth, that small blue sphere that had dared to defy him. I will erase that word from history. Leave. Down below, alarms suddenly flashed red in the human bunker. Myra's eyes widened. They are charging weapons again. Elias turned toward the control panel. Activate the grid. She hesitated, but the last activation overloaded our systems. The reactors. Do it, he said firmly. The underground complex rumbled as massive energy conduits lit up again. Blue light raced through metal veins buried under continents. On the surface, the clouds began to glow faintly as invisible fields formed around the planet. In orbit, the Empire's fleet fired. Blinding beams of plasma rained down toward Earth. But as the first blast touched the planet's shield, they twisted, bent, and shot back upward. Impossible, shouted Core as his ship shook violently. The reflected beams struck their own fleet, tearing through hulls and engines. Ships exploded like fireworks against the void. Inside the bunker, the lights dimmed. Sparks flew from the panels. System overload. Myra shouted. We can't hold it much longer. Elias gritted his teeth. Shut it down. The hum of energy faded. The lights flickered out, leaving them in darkness except for the dim red glow of emergency lamps. Myra caught her breath. Did we get them? Elias looked at the screens. Above, half of the fleet was gone, vaporized by their own fire. The rest scattered in panic. They'll retreat, he said quietly. For now. He turned toward the heavy doors of the mirror chamber. But they'll be back, angrier than before. Myra frowned. Then what do we do? Elias's face hardened. We give them a reason never to retain. He stared at the dark machines behind the glass, the ones that had somehow saved them. There was something in his eyes that wasn't relief. It was calculation. Because deep down, Elias knew the truth. The mirror protocol wasn't their last weapon. It was only the beginning. The sun rose over a wounded world. Cities were ruins, skies were gray, and silence filled the streets where once there had been life. But beneath the cracked surface, humanity still moved, stubborn, quiet, and alive. In a small underground base beneath the Rocky Mountains, Commander Elias Grant stood before a glowing monitor. It showed the same message repeating across the last surviving satellites. Empire fleet retreating beyond orbit. Myra rushed into the room, her uniform still dusty from the night before. They are pulling back, sir. Half their ships are gone. The rest are leaving Earth's orbit. Elias didn't smile. They'll regroup. The Empire doesn't run forever. But we made them run, she said softly. You made them run. He didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the flickering image of the sky above Earth. Burning wrecks still drifted there, faint trails of smoke falling like black rain. Not yet, he said. They are afraid, but not finished. Fear fades. We need something they can't erase. What do you mean? Myra asked. He turned toward her. A message. One they'll never forget. Hours later, a camera was placed on a steel platform among the ruins of what was once Washington, D.C. The air smelled of ash and metal. Craters lined the horizon. A single satellite dish pointed toward the heavens, linked to the last functioning transmission grid. Elias stepped into view, his boots crunching against broken glass. Behind him, a tattered flag moved weakly in the wind. Myra adjusted the feed. Signal locked on all frequencies. We live in 3, 2, 1. The red light blinked on. Across the galaxy, from mining colonies in the outer rings to alien cities under twin suns, screens came alive. People looked up from their work, their meals, their prayers. A human face filled the image. It was the man who had stood against the Empire. Elias began to speak. His voice was calm, deep, and heavy with meaning. "This is Commander Elias Grant of Earth," he said. "To every world that lives under the Empire's shadow, hear this, we are still here." He paused, letting the words echo. "They came to destroy us. They said we were weak. They said humans kneel. But we did not. We stood, and we fought. We bled, but we did not bow." Somewhere far away, in a mining camp on a desert moon, alien workers stopped to listen. Their guards stared at the screen, confused and uneasy. Elias continued, "You think we are finished. You think we are alone. But every world that wants to be free, every life that still remembers hope, is with us. They cannot silence all of us." Myra watched the broadcast from behind the camera. She could see his hands trembling, but his eyes were fierce. The wind tugged at his torn jacket, the flag behind him whispering like a ghost. "This is not just about Earth," Elias said. "This is about freedom. For humans. For all who suffer. The Empire can destroy cities, but it cannot destroy courage. Remember that." He looked up at the gray sky as if speaking to the stars themselves. "We may fall today, but they will remember that once a small planet said no." For a long moment, there was silence. Then he spoke one last line, the same word that had broken the Empire's confidence. "Leave." The broadcast cut to black. On a distant world in the Empire's core, the Emperor himself sat upon a golden throne, surrounded by generals and advisors. The screen before him flickered with the human's image. When it ended, the whole was silent. One general spoke carefully. "Your Majesty, shall we block all transmissions from that planet?" The Emperor's eyes, cold and pale, narrowed. "Block them? No. Find him." "But the fleet." "Find him," the Emperor repeated. "Bring me his head." The generals bowed and left, but unease filled the air. For the first time, the Empire had been challenged publicly and lost. Days passed. The message spread faster than the Empire could contain it. Copies of the transmission appeared on pirate channels, rebel frequencies, even within Imperial military bases. In dark corners of alien cities, people whispered the human's name. Elias Grant. Some said he had destroyed a fleet with a single word. Others said Earth had built a weapon beyond understanding. On one moon, a group of enslaved miners refused to work. On another, soldiers lowered their banners in secret rebellion. The idea was simple, but powerful. If one planet could defy the Empire, maybe others could too. And deep within the Empire's own ranks, some officers began to doubt. They had seen the footage. They had watched ships die without a shot fired. Something had happened on that small blue world that defied logic. Back on Earth, Myra replayed the broadcast. "It's spreading faster than we thought," she said. "They're calling it the message from the last planet." Elias leaned against the wall, exhausted. "Good. Let it spread. The more they talk, the more the Empire bleeds." "But we don't know what actually caused the shutdown," she reminded him. "The mirror protocol wasn't strong enough for that kind of power surge. Something else happened." He nodded slowly. "I know, but the Empire doesn't." He turned to look at the horizon, where the black outlines of fallen ships gleamed faintly in the distance. "They'll fear what they can't understand. That's better than any weapon." Outside, thunder rolled across the broken land. Somewhere above the clouds, the surviving alien ships turned their engines toward the stars, leaving Earth behind. But Elias knew it wasn't over. The Empire would come back, stronger and crueler. He looked up, his face hard and cold. "Next time," he whispered, "we won't just make them leave." Myra frowned. "Then what?" Elias's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "We'll make them run." Snow fell over Antarctica like ashes from a dead fire. The sky was dim, the wind sharp enough to cut skin, and beneath the frozen wasteland lay the last secret of Earth. Commander Elias Grant stood at the edge of a deep crater, his breath fogging the air. Around him, soldiers in gray coats carried metal crates, their boots crunching on the ice. They worked silently. No one asked questions anymore. At the bottom of the crater, a steel door waited. Frost had buried it for decades, but now it was open, humming with life again. Myra followed close behind him, her eyes wide as they descended the metal staircase into the frozen dark. I thought the mirror protocol was our last defense, she said. It was, Elias replied, until we found what was buried below it. The stairway led to a tunnel glowing faintly blue. Long, frozen pipes lined the walls, and strange symbols were carved into the steel, old military codes mixed with words from lost languages. At the end of the passage stood another door, larger than the rest, with a single warning written across it. Project Archangel, do not activate. Myra hesitated. So, this file was erased from every record. Even the council didn't know it existed. Elias placed his gloved hand on the scanner. The machine hesitated for a second, then turned green. The council didn't need to know. Archangel was built when we still believed we could control Fae. Before the Empire came. The door opened with a slow, heavy groan. Inside lay a vast chamber filled with dormant machines, black towers of metal stretching toward the ceiling. In the center of the room stood a circular platform surrounded by glowing rings of light. Thick cables ran from it into the ground, vanishing deep into the earth. Myra's voice was barely a whisper. What is this? Elias stepped closer, brushing frost off an old console. Archangel isn't a weapon of destruction. It's something worse. Worse. It doesn't kill, he said. It erases. She frowned. Erases what? He turned to her. Power. Technology. Anything that runs on energy. Myra stared at the glowing platform. That means... Yes, Elias interrupted softly. It would destroy every ship, every drone, every weapon in orbit. It would end the Empire's fleets in seconds. But it would also end us. No power. No satellites. No machines. The world would go dark forever. The silence between them was long and heavy. The hum of the machines sounded almost like breathing. Myra finally asked, why build something like this? Elias looked down at the console. Because our ancestors feared what would come after them. They knew that one day, someone might use our own technology against us. Archangel was meant to be the final switch, to turn it all off. He placed a small metal key on the control panel. It gleamed under the pale light. Only one person can activate it, he said, and it has to be done manually. Myra's eyes widened. That's why you brought me here. You plan to use it. Elias said nothing. So, she said, stepping closer, if you turn that thing on, we'll lose everything. Every city, every system we rebuilt. Elias looked at her, calm but tired. We already lost everything, Myra. All we have left is freedom. And freedom sometimes demands silence. She clenched her fists. And if it fails? What if it doesn't stop them? He smiled faintly. Then at least we tried something they didn't expect. Up in orbit, the Empire was already moving again. The shattered fleets were being replaced. Reinforcements from distant sectors poured in. Massive dreadnoughts surrounded the planet, glowing like stars made of metal. Inside his command ship, General Kor stood before the holographic display of Earth. His armor was scorched, his face scarred from the earlier blast. His voice was cold. This time, no mercy, he said. No waiting. Wipe them out. His officers nodded. Dozens of cannons charged in unison. Bright lines of plasma aimed at the small planet below. Back in the frozen chamber, alarms echoed through the tunnels. Myra checked her communicator. They are charging weapons again. This time it's the full fleet. Elias turned the key slowly, his voice steady. Then we're out of time. The ground shook. Snow fell from the ceiling as the first blast hit the planet's magnetic shield. The blue glow outside the tunnels flickered. So, if you do this, there's no going back. Myra shouted over the rumble. Elias placed his hand on the activation switch. The console lit up with symbols. That's the point. He closed his eyes for a moment, maybe saying a silent prayer, maybe remembering the world that used to be. They pressed the switch. A blinding white light filled the room. In orbit, the Empire's cannons fired. Plasma storms crossed the sky, tearing through the atmosphere. But then, everything stopped. The light of the blast froze mid-air. Engines went silent. Energy readings vanished. Ship after ship flickered and died, their systems shutting down instantly. On Varian's fist, General Kor shouted orders, but no sound came from his mouth. The air itself felt heavy, lifeless. His screen showed one final message before going dark. Archangel Protocol, active. On Earth, the power grid failed. Every light in the bunker turned off. The hum of generators faded to nothing. Myra blinked in the darkness. "Sir, Commander." No response. She could only hear the wind howling through the tunnels above. Slowly, her eyes adjusted. Elias stood still, his face calm, the glow of the machine dying behind him. "Did it work?" she whispered. He looked upward, as if listening to the silence spreading through the world. "Listen," he said. There was no sound, no ships, no bombs, no hum of energy. Only wind. "It worked," he said. "They're gone." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence was terrifying but peaceful. Finally, Myra said softly, "You just turned off the entire world." Elias nodded. "Then maybe it's time to start again." Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the last machine that had ever breathed light on Earth. And above them, the Empire's fleet, a graveyard of metal and glass, drifted helplessly through the void. The world was silent. No hum of machines, no signal in the air, no light from the cities that once glowed through the night. Only the wind moved, slow and cold, over a planet that had finally gone still. Commander Elias Grant stood on a snowy ridge above the Antarctic base, staring at the dark horizon. The storm had passed, leaving behind a vast white desert under a gray sky. The air tasted clean, sharp, and empty. Below him, wreckage from fallen satellites and burning fragments of alien ships dotted the landscape. Pieces of the once mighty empire now lay buried under ice and snow. Myra climbed up beside him, her breath heavy, her cheeks red from the cold. "The communications network is gone," she said. "Everything. No power, no signal, not even shortwave radio." Elias nodded slowly. "Then it worked." She didn't smile. "We've cut ourselves off completely. Humanity has gone dark." He looked at her. "Humanity is free." Myra wrapped her coat tighter. "Free, yes. But for how long? Without power, how do we survive the winter? What about the colonies off-world?" Elias's eyes stayed on the horizon. "They'll have to find their own way, just like we will." There was no pride in his voice, no victory, only quiet acceptance. The Archangel device had done exactly what it was meant to do. It had erased everything. Far above them, the Empire's fleet drifted in the black. Ships once bright with energy now floated like tombs. Crews panicked in the dark, trapped without engines, without life support, without sound. Inside the crippled command ship Varian's Fist, General Kor stumbled through the dim corridors, his armor flickering weakly. The power in his suit was nearly gone. "Get me status," he shouted, his voice echoing through the empty halls. No answer came. The bridge was dead. Screens were blank. The air smelled of burnt metal. Kor kicked the console in fury. "Impossible," he growled. "One planet, one human world, did this." He stumbled to a shattered window and looked down at Earth, small, pale, and silent. "What did they unleash?" he whispered. Behind him, one of his officers appeared, gasping for air. "Sir, the fleet, it's over. Engines are cold. The reactors, gone." Kor turned slowly. "Gone." The officer nodded weakly. "Every system dead. Even our weapons. It's like the universe itself shut us off." Kor's voice lowered to a hiss. "Get us out of orbit. Use emergency thrusters." "Sir, those two." For the first time in his life, General Kor, conqueror of 50 worlds, felt fear. Back on Earth, survivors began to gather in small groups. Soldiers and civilians moved through the ruins, lighting fires with whatever they could find. The air was cold, but for the first time, there was no drone of engines above them. In the ruins of Washington, D.C., people built campfires inside broken buildings. The light flickered against the cracked walls where screens once glowed. Children huddled around the flames, listening as elders whispered the story of the man who had told an empire to leave. Some didn't believe it. Others swore they saw it happen. But the tale spread like fire in dry grass. Elias Grant, the human who ended the sky. Myra sat beside one of the fires, watching the sparks rise into the night. Elias sat across from her, silent, lost in thought. "You should sleep," she said. He shook his head. "I can't." She studied him carefully. "You don't regret it." Elias looked up at the stars, cold, distant, unblinking. "Regret? No, but I wonder what comes next." He picked up a piece of frozen earth, turning it in his hand. "We built a world that depended on power, and power built empires. Now we've taken that away. What will humans do without it?" Myra smiled faintly. "Maybe live." He looked at her and almost smiled back. "Maybe." In space, the Empire's communication lines began to crumble. Planets that once bowed to the throne suddenly found themselves alone. Fleets gone. Energy gone. Orders gone. Governors panicked. Armies turned against one another. Without control, the Empire's strength began to collapse under its own weight. On distant worlds, citizens rose up. The word Earth became a symbol. They painted it on walls, whispered it in secret meetings, shouted it in protests. They didn't know how the humans had done it. Some said it was a weapon, others called it divine punishment. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that the Empire had been stopped, and fear began to change sides. Weeks later, snow still covered much of the northern hemisphere. Humanity adapted. They built fires, hunted for food, learned to survive without machines. It was slow, brutal work, but it was real. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight touched the snow, Myra found Elias standing on a hill overlooking the wreckage of an alien ship. He was staring at it, his hands in his pockets. "They'll come again," he said quietly. "Not soon, but someday. The Empire won't stay dead forever." She stepped beside him. "And when they do?" He smiled faintly. "They'll find a world that doesn't need power to fight back." The wind blew hard across the ice, carrying away the smoke from the fires below. For the first time in centuries, Earth was truly free. Fragile, broken, but free. Far beyond the solar system, in the empty dark between stars, faint signals drifted from the wreckage of the Empire's fleet. Some ships still floated, half alive, their black boxes recording the last transmission before their systems had died. Each one carried the same faint audio, a distorted human voice, repeating through the static. "This planet does not surrender. Leave." The words echoed in the void, carried by dead machines across space. And somewhere, in the cold heart of the Empire, the message was still being heard. The stars over Earth burned faint and cold. Far beyond them, the Empire's armadas drifted like wounded beasts. Thousands of ships floated in silence, their once golden banners now blackened by radiation burns. The command signals that once ruled hundreds of worlds were gone. The Emperor's voice, a sound that could silence galaxies, was no longer heard. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Empire had no command. General Kor stared at the empty space where Earth's signal had once pulsed. His ship, Varian's Fist, now orbited weakly, powered only by emergency batteries. "Status report," he growled. "Sir," said a young officer, trembling as he held a datapad that no longer glowed. "No energy, no navigation, no FTL drive. We trapped. Trapped." Kor repeated the words slowly, as if tasting something bitter. "A planet of primitives kills our fleet, and you call it trapped." The officer swallowed hard. "It's not just us, sir. The whole armada is gone. Every ship, every reactor, cold." Kor's fists tightened around the armrest of his command chair. "Then find the source. There must be a weapon, a pulse, So, another crewman interrupted softly. "There's nothing." The pulse came from Earth, but it didn't just disable systems. It infected the core grid. The energy itself, it's gone. Like it was erased. The words hung in the silence. Even the metal around them seemed to groan in fear. General Kor stood slowly, staring out the window. The blue planet below was calm now. No explosions. No signals. Only light and shadow moving across the surface. "Ow," he whispered. "How can a species that barely mastered space travel destroy an empire?" On the frozen world of Kael'Ren, the Empire's supply capital, riots filled the streets. The skies above the factories were dark for the first time in centuries. The power cores, the beating heart of the Empire, had all gone quiet. Citizens panicked. Soldiers fired into crowds. Governors vanished. Rumors spread like wildfire. Earth did it. They built a weapon. No, a god helped them. They said one word, and the Empire died. The phrase the humans said leave appeared on walls, carved into steel, painted in blood. The Empire, once united by fear, began to crumble from within. Back on Earth, humanity was rebuilding, slowly and painfully. In the ruins of London, hundreds of survivors worked to restore a water system using hand tools and melted snow. Children carried buckets through the streets, their laughter echoing faintly in the frozen air. Myra watched from a rooftop, her breath fogging in the cold. She turned as Elias joined her, carrying a bundle of food. "They are adapting," he said. "Better than I thought." She smiled faintly. Humans always adapt, even without machines. He looked out toward the distant horizon. The alien ships that had once hovered in the sky were gone. Only a few wrecks remained, half buried in ice. "What about the orbiting fleet?" she asked. "Still up there," he said quietly. "But dying. I've been tracking their heat signatures. Every day, fewer signals remain. Will they come down?" Elias shook his head. "They can't. The Archangel Pulse didn't just disable their power. It infected their systems. The more they try to restart, the deeper it eats into their cores." Myra frowned. "So it's alive." He nodded slowly. "In a way, it's not just a weapon. It's something else." Her eyes widened. "You mean you don't know what it really is?" Elias turned to her, his face cold and unreadable. "No one does. The signal came from beneath the ice, not from us. We only triggered it." In the deep void, on the Empire's central world, Island Prime, the Emperor sat alone in his throne room. All around him, the vast halls were silent. The light that once poured through the stained glass windows was gone, replaced by a soft, pulsing red glow from backup systems. His advisors were dead or fled. His fleets were lost. And on the cracked screen before him, one final message replayed endlessly. A human voice, calm, cold, and final. "Leave." The Emperor clenched his jaw. "You think I will bow to insects?" he hissed. He stood, his long robe dragging across the marble floor, and approached the massive war map that displayed the Empire's borders. Entire regions blinked red, systems lost, colonies revolting, fleets missing. "Prepare the vanguard," he said softly to himself. "We'll rebuild. We'll return." But even as he spoke, the war map flickered, and then, like a dying breath, went black. The lights in the throne room died. The red glow faded. The Empire's core was gone. Back on Earth, weeks later, the snow began to melt. Rivers started flowing again. Plants returned, green and fragile but alive. Myra sat by the fire one evening, listening to the sound of the wind and the crackle of burning wood. Elias joined her, holding a small metal disc. "What's that?" she asked. "The beacon," he said. "It started broadcasting again." Her eyes widened. "Broadcasting what?" Elias looked into the fire. Not a distress call. A message. She leaned forward. "From who?" He turned the disc toward her. The small speaker crackled, and a familiar voice, mechanical, distorted, ancient, whispered through the static. "The Archangel sleeps. Do not wake it again." Myra's face went pale. "What does that mean?" Elias stared into the darkness beyond the firelight. "It means it wasn't built by us," he said quietly. "And if it wakes again, it won't just be the Empire that falls." The fire popped, sending sparks into the night sky. Far above them, the last of the Empire's ships began to drift out of orbit, pulled slowly by gravity toward the blue world below. One by one, they burned as they entered the atmosphere, streaks of light falling through the sky like dying stars. Humanity watched, silent, knowing that for now, the Empire was gone. But somewhere, in the blackness between stars, something else was watching. And waiting. The snow had melted. Spring returned to Earth for the first time in years, but the air still carried silence. There were no machines, no satellites, no engines roaring across the sky. The world was alive again, raw and strange. In the ruins of New York, trees grew through cracked roads. Birds nested inside what was once a skyscraper. Humans had returned to fire and stone, to old ways of living, to the sound of wind and voice. Yet far below the surface, something ancient was waking. Elias Grant stood in what remained of the Antarctic Research Station. The storm had buried most of it under 10 meters of ice, but the underground vault was still there, sealed since the day the Archangel Pulse had fired. Beside him, Myra held a lantern made from salvaged circuits and oil. Its light flickered across the metal walls as it descended deeper into the dark tunnel. "Why now?" she asked. "Why reopen it? We agreed the Archangel should stay buried." Elias's voice was steady, but his eyes showed unease. "Because the beacon changed." Her steps slowed. "Changed how?" He stopped in front of a locked bulkhead and brushed the frost from its surface. The metal beneath pulsed faintly, a heartbeat of blue light. "It's no longer sending warnings," he said. "It's sending coordinates." Myra frowned. "Coordinates to where?" Elias looked at her. "Not on Earth." The wind howled faintly through the tunnel, as if something far away had heard their words. 3 nights earlier, a strange signal had appeared in the upper atmosphere. It wasn't radio. It wasn't light. It was something else, a pulse that resonated through the Earth itself. Birds fled. Oceans shifted. The aurora borealis appeared across the equator, glowing like veins of green fire. Elias's team recorded the pattern. It was simple, 3 repeating tones, followed by a silence that felt too deliberate. Myra had decoded part of it, a sequence of numbers. Coordinates. They pointed to a location beyond the solar system, far past the old human colonies. A dead star known only in Imperial archives as Station 9. The Empire had once called it the Silence Point, a place even they avoided. According to fragments of data recovered from alien wreckage, Station 9 was where the Empire first discovered the technology that powered their fleet, the same kind of energy that Archangel used to destroy them. Now the signal from Earth was calling back to that place. Myra followed Elias through the frozen vault until they reached the control chamber. The room was huge, filled with dead screens, collapsed panels, and a single glowing orb at its center, the core of Archangel. The orb pulsed faintly, blue and calm, like a sleeping heart. Elias stepped forward carefully. "It's waking up." Myra raised a light. "You said the energy came from below the ice, like something buried. Are you saying this isn't man-made?" He nodded slowly. "No human built this. Not even the Empire did." The light inside the orb flickered faster. Suddenly, the speakers around the room crackled to life. Faint static, followed by a voice. It wasn't human. It wasn't alien. It sounded ancient. "The Silence Point is not dead." Myra froze. "It's speaking." The voice continued, calm and cold. "The ones who enslaved the stars sought to awaken the core. They failed. Now the key has spoken again. You are not ready." Elias took a step closer. "Who are you?" "We are what remains of the first builders," the voice said. "The Archangel was not meant for war. It was meant to contain what sleeps beyond." Myra's pulse quickened. "Contain what?" "The hunger," the voice replied. "The thing that ended us before time began. The Empire touched its shadow, and it consumed their power. You released the lock." Elias's face went pale. "You mean, when we fired the pulse? You broke the seal." The room trembled. Ice cracked overhead. The orb's glow flared white, then dimmed. Myra grabbed Elias's arm. "We have to shut it down." But Elias stood frozen, staring into the light. "If it's true, then something worse than the Empire is coming." The voice spoke one final time. "You must return the key to the Silence Point before it wakes, or all light will fall." The orb went dark. For a long moment, the only sound was their breathing. Myra finally spoke. "We need help. We can't even reach the colonies." Elias turned to her, his expression grim. "Then we find someone who still can." She frowned. "Who?" He looked toward the ceiling, toward the stars. The Empire. Weeks later, under the broken sky of what was once Moscow, a small alien ship descended through the clouds, one of the few surviving Imperial crafts that had fallen into human hands. Elias and Myra approached it cautiously. The ship's pilot was waiting, an alien officer with pale blue skin and weary eyes. "You're Grant," the alien said in a voice that carried both anger and respect. "The human who destroyed us." Elias nodded. "And you're Cor?" The general's jaw tightened. "You want peace now?" Elias shook his head. "No, I want to stop something bigger than both of us." Cor narrowed his eyes. What could be worse than the Empire's fall? Elias handed him the recording from a vault. As the alien listened, his expression changed from disbelief to dread. When it ended, Cor looked up slowly. "You fool," he whispered. "You've awakened the old hunger." The wind howled again, long, cold, and hollow. Myra stepped forward. "Can we stop it?" Cor looked to the dark sky. "Not alone." Elias's voice was steady. "Then we go to the silence point." Far away, beyond the edge of the galaxy, a dark star pulsed once, faintly, like a heartbeat. Something ancient was stirring, and it had heard the signal.